On Tuesday, October 14, 1980, Deputy Security Minister Roy McGann and his bodyguard Corporal Errol White were gunned down in the community of Gardentown, St. Andrew. The killing of this politician was just one of the many brutal murders that happened during the 1980 general election period in Jamaica, a period that experienced a wave of politically motivated violence, CIA supplies of guns to the island, gang violence, arsons, police brutalities, retributions, and economic problems. I am Nigel D. Salmon. In this video, I look back at the first member of parliament killed in Jamaica and the circumstances surrounding his controversial death. I will also reveal the results of his autopsy and study his death registration form to understand the fatal wound that killed him. Welcome to Jamaican Chapter. Roy McGann, age 46, party was running for re-election as Member of Parliament for East Rural St. Andrew. Just 4 years before, in the 1976 general election, McGann was victorious when he won by 2,781 votes over the JLP candidate Oswald Harding. The 1980 general election was the bloodiest on the island, in which politically motivated violence wrecked the peace in constituencies across Kingston and St. Andrew and left burnt-out buildings, stronger gangs, lack of sufficient basic consumer goods, and the loss of hundreds of lives brutally. Causes and contributors to the wave of turmoil were corrupt politicians, corrupt police officers, abnormally high intolerance between supporters of the PNP and JLP, the backlash to Michael Manley's support of the principles of democratic socialism, and the supply of weapons by the CIA to JLP vigilantes. Among all the tragedies, suddenly came the deadly shooting involving Roy McGann. When the 1980 general election was called, nomination day was set for October 14, while October 30 was set the day when citizens were to cast their vote. On nomination day, a group of JLP supporters were gathered at Gardentown Square, now known as Miss Lowe Square. The group was waiting on the JLP candidate, Joan Gordon, who was to be nominated to run against Roy McGann. The group had gathered the day before, October 13, throughout the night into the morning of October 14. Then about 12:30 a.m., October 14, vehicles arrived at the square. Among the supporters was the man, Roy McGann. What was he and his supporters doing at the gathering of JLP supporters? Well, you see, early in the night, McGann had addressed a group of PNP supporters in Papine. Some PNP supporters from Gardentown and surrounding areas attended the Papine meeting, and so Roy McGann was accompanying them back to Garden Town. As they entered Garden Town, a fracas between the 200 to 300 JLP supporters and the small band of PNP supporters started. Both sides began flinging rocks and bottles at each other. Soon, shots were fired from the JLP supporters. Both Roy McGann and his bodyguard, who were both holders of licensed pistols, pulled out their weapons and took positions behind a zinc fence, firing back when and where necessary. Police officers soon arrived. Remember, it was still only minutes after 12 a.m. and the place was still dark. The police intervened in the shooting, the crowd scattered in different directions, and the shooting stopped. 5 persons were discovered shot. 2 JLP supporters, Eddie Simit and Victor Welsh of Garden Town, were only injured. 3 PNP supporters, Devon Grant, Errol White, and Roy McGann, were also shot. Devon Grant was only injured. The politician Roy McGann was rushed off to hospital but was pronounced dead on arrival. His bodyguard, Corporal Errol White, was found dead in a nearby gully. The question of who killed the Member of Parliament and his bodyguard was a burning one. The JLP claimed that they were killed in a shootout with the police. The PNP claimed that the Member of Parliament was assassinated. The next day, McGann's death made headline in the Wednesday Gleaner and subsequent issues. It was the first time in the history of independent Jamaica that a Member of Parliament was killed. An official funeral was held for the slain Member of Parliament on Wednesday, October 22 at the St. Mary's Anglican Church on Mullines Road in St. Andrew. His body was later buried in the rural community of Mavis Bank in St. Andrew. It is now over 40 years later, and this tragic event, for the most part, is forgotten. But I will examine the death registration form of both Roy McGann and his bodyguard Errol White to see the causes of their untimely death. On which part of their bodies were they struck by bullets, and what were the fatal wounds to their bodies? This is the death registration form of Corporal Errol White. I will look at his death registration form first before looking at the one for the politician Roy McGann. I will study the death registration form by looking first at the top of the form. At the top of the form it says death registration form, death in the district of Augustown, Parish, St. Andrew. Down in the first section it says place of death, Garden Town, St. Andrew. So yes, as we have learned, Corporal Errol White lost his life in Garden Town while serving as bodyguard to Roy McGann. We'll start by looking at the left side of the form first. The left side contains information on the deceased. On the left side it says particulars of deceased. Date of death 14th October 1980. In simpler terms, October 14, 1980. So that's the date of his death, October 14th, 1980. Below that it says full name, Errol White. You can see that the White there is spelled with an I, but for the most of the reports I've seen, it's spelled with a Y, W-H-Y-T-E. But here it is spelled W-H-I-T-E. Anyway, continuing down, it says sex, male. Yes, we all know he was male. Beside that, it says condition, and they wrote married. So yes, Errol White was married. He was married to a woman called Oberlin White. That's her name after she got married, Oberlin White. She was also a police officer. Yes. She was not serving in the force at the time. And that is because at the time that Errol White lost his life, his wife was pregnant. The couple had already had a child, which was very small, and the wife was pregnant again with another child. So at the time she was pregnant, and the first child was just a toddler. Together they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Of course, Errol White, he knew the first child, but unfortunately he lost his life while the second child was on the way. As for his wife, Oberlin White, she managed to pull through and raise the 2 children. She served in the Jamaica Constabulary Force up to the rank of superintendent. And at the time of making this video, she had already retired from the JCF and is doing something else. So yes, Errol White was married at the time of his death, and his wife was Oberlin White. Going down on the death registration form, it says age, and they wrote 24. So yes, he was 24, a very young man at the time. Um, you know, he after leaving school, he wanted to have a career in the police force, and he was determined about it. Let's read on to hear more about that, because below that we have occupation or calling, and they wrote acting corporal of police. So that was his occupation at the time, acting corporal of police. There are other reports that say he was corporal of police, but here on the death registration form and also in few articles he is referred to as acting corporal of police. In any case, he was a police officer. He joined the Jamaica Constabulary Force in 1976, age 20. And by 1980, he was promoted to corporal, or at the time, acting corporal of police. Errol White was known to be a tough police officer who was not afraid to take on dangerous situations, as we have seen in the last moments of his life. So the question is, how did he end up as bodyguard to politician Roy McGann? Well, he was put in a division of the police force called the Protective Services, a division that was set up to protect dignitaries such as politicians. And that was how he got into the company of Roy McGann, Member of Parliament for East Rural St. Andrew. He was part of Roy McGann's security, serving as bodyguard. And unfortunately, that's how he lost his life. Let's now look over on the right side of the death registration form. On the right side, we'll see the cause of death. And it reads, cause of death, immediate cause, and they wrote, the death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to the head, and to further say that the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. So at the first part it is saying the death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to head. But then the second part says and to further say the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. Let's analyze this. Let's first look at the first part in the cause of his death. I'm going to put this up on the screen so we all can see it. All of it. But we're looking at the first part first. It says, the death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to head. Let's just focus on that part. That part points to the exact cause of death. So, I'm going to say Corporal Errol White, cause of death is shock and hemorrhage. And hemorrhage means bleeding. It could be bleeding inside the body or bleeding outside the body. So he died as a result of the gunshot wound, of course. But the gunshot wound is what caused the bleeding. So after being shot, he bled to death. The death registration form does not say much about the bullet that struck him. So what I'm going to do is to give you the result of the autopsy. The autopsy report revealed that he was shot 2 times. I don't have the physical report with me to show you. So the autopsy report revealed that he was shot 2 times. The first bullet only scraped his chest. The second bullet struck him behind the ear, traveled into his head, and lodged in his brain. This second bullet was the fatal one. So the autopsy made it clear that there were 2 shots. He was shot 2 times. One, the first bullet only scraped his chest, but the second bullet struck him behind the left ear, traveled into his head, and lodged in his brain. And that is the report of the autopsy. And let's look back at what's written on the death registration form. And let's read it over again. The death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to head. Let's look now on the second part. And to further say that the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. This is the part that caused controversy. Because how can his death registration form say that that his death was an accident and that no one is criminally responsible? Think about it. Well, first of all, the question as to who shot Corporal Errol White remains unanswered. There are some PNP supporters who are saying that he was killed by a PNP supporter. And then there were others who were saying he was struck by a policeman's bullet. So it is not clear as to who shot the corporal. But then the question is, if it's not clear who shot the corporal, why would they say that the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible? If you are to believe the JLP supporters, the JLP side, such as Bruce Golding, John Gordon Webley, if you were to believe these people, they are saying that the corporal was shot by a supporter of the PNP. If that is the case, why is his death treated as an accident and that no one is criminally responsible? Wouldn't it be a murder? Then you look at what Michael Manley was saying at the time, that the corporal and the politician were assassinated. Michael Manley gave an account in which he said a witness told him that, and this was published in the Gleaner, Corporal Errol White came out with his hands in the air and he was saying, I am a member of the police, I am a member of the police, according to the words of a witness. That's what he was shouting. But egged on by JLP supporters who probably were misleading the police officers, the police officer shot Corporal Errol White. And this makes sense. You know why this makes sense to me? Because that would be the reason why they say on the death registration form that the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. Because if Corporal Errol White was shot by a civilian, this would not be said. They wouldn't be saying it was an accident and no one is responsible, you know. So, while things remain murky, it is in my conclusion that Corporal Errol White was likely shot dead by police officers that dark October morning. It was still dark. It was just after 12 a.m. That's a dark time of the night anyway. So looking over the cause of death, it says the death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to head, and to further say that the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. That's what it says on the death registration form of Corporal Errol White, a father of two, a young, ambitious police officer who lost his life way before the time. I will now look at the death registration form of politician Roy McGann. So this is the death registration form for Roy McGann, the politician. As we know, his place of death is the same as that of his bodyguard. even though he died while being rushed to hospital. But who knows? He was probably dead even before he was removed from the scene. But report is that he was rushed off the hospital, and when they reached, he was pronounced dead. On his death registration form, starting from the top, it says death registration form, death in the district of Garden Town, Parish, St. Andrew. Starting on the left, it says place of death, Garden Town, St. Andrew. And going down in the second section, it says particulars of deceased. Date of death 14th October 1980, which in simple term is October 14, 1980. Below that it says full name Roy McGann. Below that you have sex. It says male, and we all know he was male. Beside that it says condition, and they put married. So yes, Roy McGann was married. Information on his marriage and his wife was not available up to the time of making this video. It was just difficult to find information on his wife and maybe his children. And he was the politician, so he was not somebody who was less known than his bodyguard. But I did not go into his community to learn more. So information on his wife is not available herein. Below that, it says age 46. So yes, he was 46 years old. Below that, you have occupation or calling, and it is blank. Makes you wonder why. Well, Mr. Roy McGann was a businessman and politician. At the time of his death, he was also Deputy Security Minister and Parliamentary Secretary. So if I was to put one of those things here, I would put either businessman or politician. He was known, and even today, if you think back on him or even read on him on Wikipedia, he is described as a politician. But as I say, he was a businessman, a member of parliament, politician. At the time, he was parliamentary secretary, and he was deputy security minister. So he was a man with many titles, many titles. Below occupation, you see birthplace. I'm not sure where he was born, But when after he died, he was buried in Mavis Bank, the community of Mavis Bank in St. Andrew. And there is not a cemetery in Mavis Bank. People buried their loved ones in family plots. So he probably was born there, or he was living there at the time of his death. Let's now look over on the right side of the farm. And on the right side of the farm, we will see the cause of his death. On the right side of the farm, it says, cause of death, immediate cause. And they wrote, the death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to the chest, and to further say that the death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. This reads almost the same way as the bodyguard's death registration form. The only difference was or is where the bullet struck each man. In the case of the bodyguard, he was shot 2 times. But in the case of Roy McGann, it said, and I repeat, the death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to the chest. So, as we know, shock and hemorrhage is the cause of death due to being shot in the chest. In simple terms, he bled out because he was shot in the chest. His autopsy report says that he was shot once by a police rifle. And the autopsy said that the bullet entered through his left ribs. Bullet went through his body. So it entered his left ribs and went through his body. And the autopsy went on to say he died from massive bleeding from his left lung. So he pretty much died the same way as his bodyguard. The only difference is that the bodyguard was shot in the head and Mr. McGann was shot in the chest. The bodyguard bled out from the head and Mr. McGann bled out from the chest. The death registration form is the official shows the official cause of death. So without any elaboration, here is what it says. The death was due to shock and hemorrhage as a result of gunshot injury to the chest, and to further say that death was due to an accident and that no one is criminally responsible. Well, up to this day, that's not what the PNP believed. The PNP under Michael Manley believed that their member of parliament, and we are talking about the man, Roy McGann, was assassinated. That he was assassinated, while the JLP at the time said that Mr. McGann was killed by the police because he engaged the police in a shootout. But Michael Manley at the time was quoted in the Gleaner as asking a very logical question. He said, how, and I'm not quoting him, I'm just saying it back in my own words. He said, he said that Mr. McGann was a licensed firearm holder. And why would he, a licensed firearm holder, with just an automatic pistol, engage police officers who were carrying rifles? And what would have been the purpose of him wanting to engage the police officers? In an article in the Gleaner at the time, a witness stated that on seeing the police, Mr. McGann stepped from behind the zinc fence he was hiding and shouted, "I am Roy McGann, the Member of Parliament," with both his hands in the air. But a member of the police force shot him anyway. Whatever had happened on that night, no matter how controversial it is, the truth is somewhere. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting videos like this.